Good evening to one and all present here. A warm welcome to this event, a very special event of its kind on a very special day, which is the Women's Day, the International Women's Day. And I thank you all for being here and showing your solidarity for such an important cause. It's not about being extraordinary. It's not even about being a high performer or a great cook or a caretaker. None of these yardsticks or constructs spin around the identity of a woman. None of this ultimately matters. Being a girl in India is very special. There are girls in villages of Haryana, Punjab, who are very strong, brave, and empowered. And there are girls in the well-to-do, so-called educated urban families who are abused and victimized. Ultimately, it's a question of who surrounds these girls, as is the case with boys too. When they are being brought up, who surrounds them? The way they are conditioned to look at their own identities. But that's not the only thing. We see girls from the most traditional backgrounds emerging as bold decision makers and radical thinkers. I think our societal constructs have led many a woman to rebel against the set, unreasonable expectations around her. We are redeemed only when we become a dutiful, supportive wife, a nurturing mother, or an obedient daughter. But what about us? Our success, our ambitions, and our opinions are generally overshadowed by our responsibilities and societal expectations. Over time, women have emerged as a major workforce. They are a workforce to reckon with, and we keep recalibrating our connect with the other genders, knowing fully well that the amalgamation of both will ultimately lead to the optimization of strengths. Here's to the men who have supported and motivated us all the way, who've made us reach a level when we can think for ourselves and believe in ourselves. Having said that, we have also made ourselves reach that level. Being allies in workplace works well both ways. It's a win-win situation for everyone. So with these words, I start today's very special session on how can men and women be better allies in workplace. I welcome all the audience. And before we begin with our discussion, I have a question for all the audience, which they can write in the chat box, whichever way they feel like. Feel free to respond. And here's the question. What do you feel about having the other gender as an ally in your workplace? What do you feel about having the other gender as your ally in your workplace? So feel free to write in the chat box. Often dominated. Ms. Rajni says, I feel sometimes dominated. I get to see different perspectives and how they have come to exist. I feel that they are the greatest contributors. Vishnu loves having women. He adds so much work, creativity, and sensitivity. Raga feels it should be normalized. Normalized is an interesting.
What did the others think about it? Let's have like one word each from everyone. Everyone on the chat box. Thank you. So this is Mohan saying, in my opinion, combination of genders makes workplace a place full of joy. More women should join. Teamwork. Okay. What else? What else?
Workplace is like a family, a mix of gender and age. The other gender respects the woman too. The man who respects his mother respects the lady in the workforce. Caring and helping each other and equality. Well, that's such varied reactions. Very interesting. Let's see if some of these perspectives change by the end of the discussion. Multiplicity of perspectives can spark innovation, is what Shalini has to say. Well, thank you, dear audience. It's a pleasure to welcome and have some very interesting and enlightened panelists amongst us. I'd like to welcome Sandhya S. Pillai, who is a motivational speaker, a corporate MC and presenter, brings with her 20 years of extensive experience in delivery, presentation style, and professionalism. Sandhya is a well-organized, charismatic, and powerful anchor. She's also a host and presenter, known to bring knowledge, energy, and fun quotient to various events. I welcome you, Sandhya, to this event. We have Ashwin Chandrasekhar, who's a 27-year-old and calls himself pro-feminist. He is Vice President Strategy at the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship, a platform seeking to address India's job crisis through local entrepreneurship. Previously, he has worked as a senior consultant at Dalberg Advisors, a strategy consulting firm which focuses on social impact. Through his experience, he has deep dived into numerous social issues such as water access, urban renewal, contraceptive behavior, youth empowerment, and much more, applying a gender lens all the way. Through school, university, and work, Ashwin was inspired by women who, either through example or direct action, helped make the world a little bit more gender equal. And through his podcast and his day-to-day activism, his attempt is to bring about more gender equality around him. Welcome, Ashwin, to the session. Then we have Debbie Smith, who was born and educated in the United Kingdom. According to her, she feels blessed with a wonderful career as a teacher and head of school. which has allowed her to travel extensively. She has worked in Georgia, USA, Rome, and now working in Kerala. And she's a passionate teacher and loves to discover new places and make new friends. She has a degree in English and American literature, and she's a graduate historian studies from the University of Liverpool. Welcome, Debbie. You bring about a new perspective to this session. Then we have Raga Ramalakshmi, who's an advocate practicing currently at the High Court of Kerala in Tamil Nadu. She previously worked with multinational companies such as ICICI and Thomson Reuters to shape the formative years of her career. She is an alumni of the National University of Advanced Legal Studies, Cochin, and has won several awards for her skills in various moot court competitions. She was given the Best Speaker Award for Kerala Law Academy Moot Court Competition on Constitutional Law and the Best Memorial Award for Stetson International Environmental Law Competition. Presently, she is a litigator for the past 10 years, particularly in the field of commercial law, arbitration, and writs. She is the partner of Enterprise Legal Solutions, a law firm based in Kochi for the past 6 years. We have Mr. Pratap Ramdas, who's the Director, IR Compliance and Munnar Operations from Tata Consumer Products Limited. He manages legal and industrial relation departments of Tata Tea Limited. And currently he supports the industrial relation issues of factories and establishments of TCPL, including guidance, evaluation, and assessment of labor law compliance. He's handling the legal issues, the CSR function, the community initiatives of TCPL, and in particular, the Affirmative Action Program. Welcome, Pratap, to the gathering. We have the vibrant Mr. Surya Narayan Bahadur. Surya Narayan Bahadur calls himself the transformation enabler. He's a resource person and corporate trainer, an alumnus from the Sri Ram College of Commerce, and he enables professionals to develop talent so they work and live better. So welcome, Surya, to this gathering, and we know that you will ignite a lot of conversations and give us a lot of new perspectives to what we are going to discuss today. We also were expecting Lieutenant Commander Payal Gupta, who unfortunately is not well. She's suffering from cold and fever, so she won't be able to join us. So we'll miss her in the gathering today. I also would like to welcome Vishnu and Angie. Vishnu and Angie are the founders of Propel Curriculum, and both are, very vibrant and deep thinkers in their own field. And Angie would be moderating the event with me. Let me introduce myself. I'm Pooja Bose. I am the principal of the High Range School, which is in Munnar and which is managed by the Tata Consumer Products Limited. I welcome you all to this gathering. We have a great session today. And now we begin today's session with a question to all our panelists. So are we good to go? Great. So here is your question. You'll be given 5 minutes. So I just want you all, it's not a quiz, but yeah, I just wanted all of you to speak for 5 minutes about what you think personally about this question, which is reflecting on your work life. Describe some key impacts of having worked with the other gender. I repeat, reflecting on your work life, describe some key impacts of having worked with the other gender. We could remove the screen, Jinsey, now and have the, you know, focus on the speaker. We start with Debbie, perhaps.
Thank you, Plusha. I had a feeling you might say that. Okay. I was reflecting on this question in preparation for this afternoon, and I was remembering the various areas of employment that I have experienced. I've been very fortunate. I've had lots of variation. I've worked in the travel industry, I've worked in retail, and I've worked in the field of education. When I was in the tourist industry, I worked one-on-one with men. I worked 5 years in retail in an exclusively female team. And then I've enjoyed more than 20 years in education in schools across 4 countries and 3 continents, Europe, USA, and more recently, India. And I think personally, the most challenging situation for me revolved around the idiosyncrasies of an individual with whom I had to work really closely for between 2 and 4 weeks. I was the tour guide and the drivers were exclusively male. So we were on the road for anywhere between 14 and 28 days and nights. And it was imperative to stress professionalism and deflect any attention away from gender differences in order to achieve that equilibrium, which allowed us to work well as a team in a very pleasant and professional environment. And I'd never really thought about that process until I had to reflect on it for this panel today. And I think to say that absolutely deflecting anything that had to do with gender issues. It was nothing about, well, you're a man and therefore you should do this, nor was it, well, I'm a woman and therefore I need to do that, but rather to keep the relationship extremely professional in a way almost ignoring any difference in gender seemed the best way to sustain a very professional relationship. And remember that we were miles away from home, working with a group of holidaymakers and tourists. So I was not part of a team. Once we were working, we were on our own. And so at times it felt a very vulnerable situation, especially perhaps as a woman, but it was focusing constantly on professional. What are the professional duties, professional responsibilities? What is appropriate professional behavior? And so the gender roles being different was not an issue. And then for 5 years after that, in retail, all of my colleagues were female. So I didn't need to worry about gender distinctions, but it was still really important to nurture a professional rapport. And as you probably know, if you've ever worked with a group of people, there are those with whom it's very easy to work, and there are those who present more challenges, and perhaps you don't look forward to working with them quite so much. So I noticed that when I was working exclusively with a female team, it wasn't a wonderful gift. Oh, now I'm just surrounded by women, so we can all enjoy ourselves every day. No, there was still individualism, idiosyncrasies, challenges along the way. In 1992, I started teaching. So I entered education, I entered teaching in 1992, and I became part of a mixed gender team. That was the first time. Traditionally, management and senior teaching posts were male dominated. And I'm talking about, at the moment, I'm talking about in the UK. I think it was probably also true of other countries. But I find that this is constantly shifting. And I believe it's as women acquire more confidence to raise their expectations. I think women today are more likely to pursue a promotion and to pursue professional development. I once heard a statistic, and this is back in the 90s, I don't know if it's true now, but I heard a statistic that a woman would apply for a promotion if she believed that she could, she was capable and competent in 70% of the qualities needed for that post. So if a woman felt that she could do 70% of all the duties, she would apply. Whereas, according to the statistics I heard, for a man, 30%. If he thought, well, I can do 30% and I'll just pick up the rest as I go, or I'll learn it. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. But I think that it is shifting, and I think that it's shifting constantly. And we'll talk a little bit about reasons why later on. So from my own experience, I know that I became a head of department. I've also been the head of a senior school, and I've worked with a female principal. So male or female, I have found that some colleagues have been very supportive, very professional, inspirational, and others have sometimes proved lazy, arrogant, manipulative, regardless of their gender. I have seen those qualities in men and women in different situations. So consequently, I tend not to focus on gender. I choose rather to consider the individual. So in answer to the question about the impact of working with men and working with women, I would say it's taught me to work with people, individuals. Thanks, Pooja.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for your reflection on the impact. May I now request Sandhya to say a few lines about this question, how she feels about the impacts which she has felt.
Sure. Thanks, Pooja, and thanks, Debbie. I think I kind of resonate with what Debbie is saying, because early on in my career, with now have like close to 20 years, more than 20 years of industry experience. But I also started with customer service and banking, and I started my career typically working in an advertising agency. So back then, if I look back, it's around 2001 or 2002. I didn't really have a lot of, gender inequality that I felt, Pooja, because we were all on typically salespeople reaching out for client servicing and ensuring that the targets were met, the targets were the same, the incentives were the same. I don't know what social economic conditions were at that time, but didn't feel that as a sales executive or a client service executive. So I then moved to American Express, and as people know, it's considered one of the best companies anybody would love to work with because they're so employee centric. I've also worked with HSBC, have worked with some of the top shot women from UK in HSBC leading different departments. Having said that, though, when I look at public sector banks today, the number of women leaders at the top, and compared to what it was in Amex or HSBC, it is different today. Now that I've worked with public sector banks and do a lot of leadership training with them, for me, it's a 360-degree change. And I see that, while I was working with Amex in the year 2004, there were almost equal number of women also working in the financial or the fraud section. But that's something that I don't see here in the public sector bank. So it could be that, I was lucky to work with companies at early stage of my career where I really didn't feel gender equality, didn't really sense that. In fact, we were always encouraged. We were, when I was working with HSBC as well, there were cases where men would walk up to us and coach us. Females were also coached for the next level, so it was equal. The career advancement or the LDP, which is the leadership development programs, were equal. They were given equal chances. The band, everything was equal, and the opportunities were equal. I think, like Debbie said, as and when we started moving up the ladder and more complications and complexities in levels of or the hierarchies of the organization started. And also, I think women woke up and wanted to demand what they wanted to, and because they was suddenly realized that there is different value system that can be attached. I think the gender inequality is visible to me now. Now that I don't work with the corporates, I am an entrepreneur. I do see that, Pooja, and I discussed that in fact in the last time discussion also, that that is tremendous. When I, as an entrepreneur, walk out and I look for support in terms of financial support, banking support, digital support, there is a lot of gender inequality. I will have to, today I've learned that I have to take somebody along with me to get all my paperwork done or documentation done, because if I don't, then there are chances of my paper not getting processed. Okay. So I'm not talking bureaucracy here. I'm talking about the inequality. When I talk about numbers in terms of what is that I can achieve from the business, there is a question mark. They don't understand. They don't relate to me achieving that numbers, right? So and also that segregation of, okay, so you are a woman, so typically yes, you'll be in a training on an HR kind of a business, right? That's understood. So that's again a gender bias that I faced. After I became an entrepreneur in the year 2012 is when I actually sensed gender inequality in all areas of my life. I'll talk about the personal also, where I faced tremendous gender inequality, but I was lucky that I worked with companies, and in the corporate, I really didn't feel that. So that's my reflection of my career. Now that Debbie said, in fact, I also was reflecting back. I was lucky that I didn't have that then.
Yeah, Sandhya, what is coming up as a commonality between what Debbie and you are saying, as we go up the ladder, or as the pyramid, we reach towards the top of the pyramid, these inequalities became more stark and maybe more visible. And
Yeah.
did that, I think I'm assuming that that did impact you somehow. So we'll talk more about what kind of bearing it had on you and how you changed your course of life because of that. So I'd like
Yes.
to invite Surya to pitch in and say a few words about this question. Very interesting question.
Okay, so I have been in sales all my life, and now also I'm selling training programs for various corporations and schools and all kinds of education institutions, companies, retailers, consumer product companies, FMCG companies, all kinds. So, and I feel there are a large number of women who are coming in the sway in the workforce. And today only I had a program in the morning for Indian Oil Corporation, and there were about 30% women. And we were doing a mentoring program, and we were these mentees who had joined from various IITs, and it was great. So I think it's improving. What I feel that whether it's man or women, most people, if you have to manage people, it's the ego part of a human being that could show up irrespective of the gender. So I would agree to what Debbie said and Sandhya said. That's what my experience has been. When we went to recruit, or whenever I worked in various multinational corporations, whenever we went to recruit people also from various management institutions also, we would want to select up a boy because in sales, boys would do, they could travel alone, this, that. But we landed up selecting women, and they did a great job. Like I still remember, I used to be the head of sales for Perfetti, which is world's biggest chewing gum or confectionery company, and we selected girls for various sales assignments, and they did so many new things for the company which they would have never thought that men could achieve, because they had these preconceived notions. They had worked in earlier companies, somebody had come from Nestle, somebody from Cadbury's, that's why I had all these conversations. So is in schools and colleges. I go to various colleges, and we have equal numbers now, larger numbers of women also who are heads, and I think they're doing well, and so are men. So I don't see any issue at all in my perception like that. However, when you talk to them individually, they've had bad experiences dealing with lower level of people, people from, like, the bus drivers making a glance or a comment, and we tell them it's part of the game. That's only we can tell them. We can't teach the driver unless we do training program for the driver also, how to talk to ladies, how to behave. So civility is missing as far as the ladies go. That is what my take is. Otherwise, I do about 300 programs every year, and I see large number of women participation, and increasingly larger number of women in the workforce. So I think they should be encouraged more. They could come up There are not so many things. And parents should also do that. A lot of parents have this perception which they tell ladies. I was doing a training program. I won't name the airline. I was doing an airline program for air hostesses, and there was a larger number of females, and most of them have been taught by their parents that men are generally not good. In fact, one of the girls told me that most men are, I think, have the tendency of being a rapist. Imagine. I said, please, nobody would spend so much of money to come in an aircraft to think like that. Don't ever think like that. So imagine that's what they were felt. So that's my take on gender equality. I think they really contribute well, and I've never had any complications, issues with the different gender. So that's what.
Wonderful. Ashwin, would you like to say something?
Sure. No, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm quite excited to speak about this issue. It's something that's very close to my heart. I think if all of us interact with the other gender throughout our kind of childhood, college, work, relationships, and I probably want to touch a little bit on each because all of it interacting with the other gender has been quite meaningful. So as I was growing up, my dad was in the armed forces, so I changed about 14 schools. And each one of these schools, I had this tendency to come second in class, never first, but second. And I would invariably come second to a girl. And that consistent theme, first standard all the way up to, say, about 10th, this happened to me. And I was lucky enough to be in context constantly, which gave me the opposite of the story men are used to hearing, which is that men are not good in mathematics, that men are bad drivers, that there are set expectations women are bad at mathematics, women are bad drivers, that there are certain expectations at home that we have from women. The narratives of my life were the opposite. I was getting my butt kicked every year by a girl in academics. When I went to college, I was in a classroom of 115 women and 5 men studying psychology, where they were some of the smartest women I'd ever met in my life. In fact, in school, I was in a humanities section, which is often considered kind of the section that the subjects no one takes in 11th and 12th standard. But I was in a class of 35 women, 5 of us men. And there was never a question in my mind that any of them, there was never a doubt in my mind that any of them could be a leader in the future. Like they could be running a company. They could be the Prime Minister of India. Like they were incredibly smart women. And so I think having these women in my life by accident, most men do not, unfortunately, have the context to be in kind of a class where women are 95%. Most engineering classes are the opposite. And so I was constantly given the counter narrative and I was sold. It was very easy for me to become a feminist afterwards. And so I think that growing up, those kind of breaking mental barriers, going against what society was telling me was something that the other gender taught me very concretely. This also helped me become a better professional because when I started working, I worked in the social impact development sector, poverty alleviation, environment space. And everything has gender attached to it. Every indicator you see in India, women are probably doing 20 odd points lower than men. And because of my experiences of speaking to women, interacting with women, I got to understand why much, much better than I would have as someone who went through a more traditional journey as a boy. I could understand why there were, toppers of my class until 12th standard in college. And then suddenly in work, none of the leaders in my company were women. I could understand why that funnel is happening. And I think that was really, really important that I went through that journey. And it was all thanks to all of the effort various women have put in getting me up to speed. I think at work, there were a lot of different female bosses that particularly inspired me. I saw a female boss who was very respectful of weekends, which is something we should be basic in any organization. Was very respectful of weekends, and that made me a better boss in the future. It's something that I take forward. I didn't get that from men bosses or male bosses very often. And learned this more, I understood that my female manager had actual responsibilities as at home. She had to look after her in-laws. My male managers, who are dads, don't often have an expectation to spend that much time at home. So I think I learned a lot of these dynamics growing up, and if I was surrounded by a group of men or male friends, I probably wouldn't have learned these things. Yeah.
Which is very interesting, Ashwin, when you've clearly actually etched the impacts, the influences which your women colleagues had on you, and especially during your formative years when you were, getting into the workforce and you were being groomed from junior level to probably middle level to the senior level. So the impact and the kind of influences which you've had because of having women bosses perhaps has made all the difference in your life, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, so Surya, although Surya did put very beautifully the fact that it's about individual performance and it's not about gender. But I'd like to know, Surya, something which you did not really bring up, and maybe you can do it now. How did it make a difference to you? Did it make any difference to you when you saw all this around you? Did you develop some change of feelings or sentiments towards the other gender?
I think I always had very, very good feeling about the other gender, and they've always contributed a lot in our companies and all the companies I have worked for. And now also we have so many people who work in our organization who are ladies, and they contribute a lot. And it's just that we have to take a little care that, as I shared yesterday also, that they have to be dropped together with some colleague and they cannot travel alone and all that, which we do take care. So I think it's perfect and it really works. And that also happens only because sometimes in India, you can land up in a messy situation, which our company then will have to take care or look after, which we want to avoid. So I think they really contribute very well. They're very hardworking people and they bring a lot of creativity to work. So and it's not that you have to pay less more. We pay them based on their merits. So that's what it is. So,
I think one thing that Surya had mentioned in his earlier sharing was very important, that how during his work he's discovered how different people come up with their own conditioning, their own sets of preconceived notions.
Always.
And when they come to the workplace, that's the space, or the training space, that's the space where all of those conditionings can be broken down and sort of, the mind opened up. So I thought that was something that was really
and
like
most
a
men
way
now
forward.
in the training company that I work for, most men and women actually attend so many training programs. We do about 300 a year, almost one every day. And now online so many more, 2-3 also in a day. So I mean they listen to all that conversation that we do of brainwashing, each gender, how to look at things differently, or how not to get into old paradigm or
a lot of
mindset.
deconditioning happens in your workplace. Yes, provided you have an open mind, you're
Really,
ready to kind
and
of
if you
change.
listen a couple of times, I think people get let's listen. I think it's good for me, and then it works for them. Probably you see the whole thing, as Debbie said, we have to be more result oriented or be uh, objective rather than be subjective of what the gender is and which background this girl comes from. Is she a Muslim, Christian, this, that? Because these conversations also happen. We have all religion who work in our companies. So, in fact, some of them I still remember. We were in a program for dealers of a cycle company, and this girl is called Rimsha. So one of the dealers came to, is she Muslim? Because that looks like a Muslim name. Imagine. So I said, yeah, she's a Muslim. Oh, she's shaking hands with everybody, and he was so moved by the fact that she was groomed that well, and she had studied at Presentation Convent and very good schooling and all that. So it had nothing. We never differentiated between any gender. So that's how it is.
So we now have Pratap Ramdas, and he's from Bangalore too. And I always feel Bangalore is a very female-friendly, safe place to be. So Pratap, what do you have to share with us?
Good evening, everyone. So I think most of the uh, participants in one way or the other have known me. So and therefore it's easier for me to relate to how I have seen this journey of working as a mixed gender, because I don't see it to be different. You said that whether it's a male, it's a female, okay, you're a guy, this other's a lady, and you have to. I work as we are colleagues, we are one, and we do the same kind of work, and the job has its equality. But the fundamental understanding that I've had in all my years is that majority of the inequalities, as we call it, is created by our upbringing, our norms, our culture, our system, based on which our theory of evolution started thousands of years back, and it relates to the way communities are built in, and that at one stage it was okay. Okay, in the theory of evolution, I've been very influenced by a couple who are top-notch psychiatrists who have done brain mapping studies, Dr. Barbara and Alan Pace, and their books have been great learning for me. And what it means is the theory of evolution, according to them, started with men are hunters, women are nest defenders. Okay, and that is in our genetic wiring. So we must understand that we are not equal. Men and women are not equal. They are different. They are wired differently. They are two different genetic wiring for men, another genetic wiring for women, and one is not better than the other. Both are good. They are strengths, and they have a reason how they behave and how they interact in a community. And there's no comparing that is man equal to woman or woman equal to man. One is better than the other. No. As far as a work profile is concerned, we are absolute equals. There are certain strengths. I'll give you an example which you would notice in your homes. How many of you would agree with me? But I have seen it all over. It is there in my household. A telephone rings. If the husband has to fix the phone, he has to reduce the TV volume. And when he is speaking, and if the wife or daughter speaks, they'll get angry. Shh, I'm on a telephone call. Please don't disturb me. The same, if the phone rings and the lady picks up the call, she'll not only speak over there, she'll speak to the servant, she'll speak to the husband, she'll tell the kid, go and keep your books there, because they can generally multitask. Men cannot. So when you are conversing with a man and you are discussing one subject, that is even man to man, and suddenly you change to another subject, the opposite side gets irritated. Look, are we talking about sales today, or are we talking about today's dinner? But whereas when a woman speaks to you, she will speak to you from multiple subjects at the same time, because they can multitask. A man cannot. So are men and women equal? No. In a dining table, the conversation will be there. We're having a party in the house, and okay, wife will say, I'll make all this. You do, you bring the beverages, you take care of the beverages. In between, she will say, mother called to say, the driver didn't come. The man's general response is, are we talking about the party today, or are we talking about mother? And the girl looks at you, the wife looks at you saying, what's wrong? What did I do wrong? She has multitasked, and the guy cannot understand that. So as long as you understand the differences between the way we are wired, your house, your job profile would change. If I am interacting to a lady colleague, I will, to some extent of understanding how she would think, helps me to communicate better. And if she understands, she doesn't multitask with me, I will get an understanding. And many of my lady colleagues know that when we are talking one subject, you suddenly go on to think, I suddenly sound irritated. It's but natural. So we are here saying that, we are wired differently, yet we are, we should be equal. We are not equal. We are unequal as two genders. But it is understanding that inequality and nurturing that inequality that makes a workplace truly meaningful. Respect for each other, for the strengths the person is and the strengths each gender has. Men have got their specific genetic strengths. Women have got the specific genetic strengths. And that has got nothing to do with the workplace, where we both contribute equally and one better than the other, depending on the merits of the individual. So that's one of the learnings I've had. But why in India we have these issues is because of a cultural background and the cultural diversity. And when you do, corporate social responsibility (CSR) projects, especially when you do it for the marginalized of the communities, you understand that is where women need help. We did a study, we did a study when we were doing the affirmative action, and we've been helping out the marginalized. And for me, also, this was a learning that in India, under the British rule, there was a law called the Criminal Tribal Act. That means anyone born in those tribes by the accident of birth is a born criminal. Even before you get named, you are a criminal. And you are known as they were known as criminal tribes. Today in India, it's called denotified tribes. When a study was done in 14 of those tribes, we found all the men were in jail for one reason or that they were arrested in. All the women are into prostitution. And how will those children grow up? A lot of work has gone on in rehabilitating them and educating those women, educating the children, bringing them up and making them a part of the society. So that's the area where actual women are suffering. At the bottom of the pyramid, at where the marginalized communities, where actual this inequality of opportunities are being very challenging. But otherwise, India is moving ahead. We have huge opportunities for women. And as many of my colleagues would know, my concept of gender equality is not doing some onboarding some 100 men, giving them a quality life by giving the opportunities for everyone to grow. And that is the basis of which, of course, our company also, Tata Group, very strongly believes in it. And in the affirmative action, one of our agendas now is women upbringing women. We are not talking about someone who's born with a silver spoon, but we are talking about women who really need help. They need to be onboarded into our journey. And the learning that has brought me and the impact that I've had is working with women has always been pleasurable because they bring in a different dimension, because they are different in their mind thinking. So you learn a lot, which you normally do not learn from them. That's from my side to start this.
Thanks, Pratap. Which is very interesting, when you say that women are hardwired to multitask. I feel that over years and years of harboring this expectation that women can multitask, there has been a genetic mutation in women, and they have begun to multitask. And they do it so well now because they are genetically now, it's programmed now in them because of the expectation.
Oh, it is genetically there. It is genetically there. It's proved. Brain scans have shown it is natural talent. Man cannot, because Dr. Barbara and Alan Peace have shown the brain scan, which says that is why men they are the hunters, and that's how the job profile started. Which is that dynamics is changing over the few centuries now.
We'll talk,
and that multitasking is.
We will talk more about this, whether women can multitask or women have to multitask. This is something very interesting subject for me.
This is
That is different.
Pooja, this has brought something very interesting out for me. Suddenly the conversation, I'm just going back to the conditioning conversation now. Where I was just looking at my own self. So I've been involved in getting some property for myself recently. And while I had to get into buying of that property, there was so much of this thing about having, my own parents not trusting that I can do it. So have you checked with somebody else? Is there some other male involved who will understand this? Can that person come and explain it to us?
Correct.
So, and me also not feeling complete confidence in myself, not because I don't think I can do it, but because the kind of exposure I have had right from my childhood doesn't equip me enough to handle those areas. finances was not an area that I was taught to deal with the way I would see any other person around me, any other male member around me doing it. They were more equipped for doing that, and I was more equipped for other things that, the exposures were so different, given so differently. So, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll go on later now.
We will deliberate more on this. Another example is the manufacturing industry, for example. So few women are there. And so is it that men, if we scan men's brain, they are better manufacturers? Or is it that they are conditioned? So it's a very interesting subject. We need to maybe talk more about this. But let's move to the field of law. The legal field, and Raga can tell us how she feels about this question.
Okay, so I have listened to the various perspectives that have come here, but the key impact of having another gender in a workplace is how it impacted my gender, is how I'm going to answer this question. So it started when there was an internship, right? So me and a classmate of mine were selected. He was male. We were selected to intern literally at the #1 law firm in India at that point of time, and we both went there, and it was very interesting. But he was assigned a male lawyer, and I was assigned with a female lawyer. I don't know if it was a gender conscious decision then. I didn't even think about gender at that point of time. We started working, and over a course of time, we used to get work from different departments. And particularly, there was a time where both of us were working under a male lawyer. Now, what happened was the number of hours we put in were the same. The type of intellectual ability is also the same, and how we would communicate was not vastly different. And yet, they would go on tea breaks, and when he came back, he was on a first name basis with the lawyer. And since I was an intern then, I was still at the sir stage. And that's when the gender construct to me became very real and visible. And then I realized, oh, I'm a girl. I can't go for these tea breaks because that didn't really suit my interest or inclination. And because I was asked to, because I would sit back and work, when he came back, I was still at junior, senior level, whereas they grew up to be friends. So the gender gap was really visible then, and that was the internship point of time. And then I started working. So in the workplace, it was very different in the sense we were all being paid, right? So initially, I started work with the corporate, and the corporate considers everyone to be like cogs in a machine, right? We all have to perform, the machine can run well. So it was more of productivity and intellectual input and general camaraderie, which I enjoyed a lot, wherein there was not much of a distinction. Even if the tea breaks would happen, there was not much of an alienation within the workspaces to me being a female and them being a male. And, they were able to bond better than me. That didn't really happen at that point of time. Probably also because I had female bosses and I would vouch for them, by the way. And then I walked into litigation where I work with the High Court of Kerala and I do work with the High Court of Tamil Nadu also. So here you see what is the fact being that there are tens and thousands of male within that institution. So you step in, it's like a crowd of cloaks, and 98% of those cloaks are men. There are these few hundreds of women who probably put together would form just a mere thousands and so on. And we would try our place, but most often than not, what I realized is there were three visible spectrums. So one is complete acceptance, right? Like they would not see me as a female trying to argue a case. They would just look at me as an advocate, trying to make my case before a particular judge. And the second spectrum would be a sort of reluctant acknowledgement that, oh, yeah, she's trying to say something intelligent, right? Though she's a female. Oh, I acknowledge that she's an advocate because she's wearing a gown and we have bestowed a degree on her. But it wasn't really a complete acceptance. And the third point was actually a very sexual purview of who I was. So in certain interactions, I've been very aware of the fact that I am a female and they are a male. whereas in other places I have not been. Though when it comes to an intellectual conversation, I have been very much comfortable with the other gender, that we could joke, we could laugh, we could discuss anything under the sun. But there have been the impact would be that in a hetero workspace presently, I'm very aware that I belong to a certain gender, and that impact stayed. So I'm trying to move it to a point where it can be normalized, where students who move out of the college to a professional workspace need not recognize that gender gap exists or gender screen exists. I'm sorry, not gap, but maybe it could be normalized where, if it is an intellectual workspace, it's just two persons belonging to the human race who would come and intellectually discuss a matter. Or if it is a creative workspace, which is basically just two humans who would just come in and try and recreate it, or anything that for that matter, it's just humans and not really a gender screen. So that's the key impact that it has had on me.
Raga, I like the term gender screen because it's really not hitting us, but somewhere it's just making us feel, like we are women or we are girls, and kind of intimidate us in a very subtle manner. Uh, did it did it affect your work in any which way, or did it make you bolder, or were you like more aggressive, or more you thought, let me be a notch higher than what I generally am? How did it impact you?
Okay, so like my general view, which I have developed over the years, is that women are also the dominant intelligent species on Earth. Not the men alone, it's the women too. And right now it's the third gender too, right? Like we're going ahead encouraging or even acknowledging the fact that women exist as dominant and intelligent species, whereas that is true from day one. And we are acknowledging that transgenders or third genders are also dominant intelligent species on Earth, whereas that has also been true from day one. But in terms of how it has impacted my work is, I'll tell you some jovial real life examples. Like when I start, so I'm 35 now, and though I don't look much, I'm sort of old. I'm almost my way to 40, and but when people look at me, I've had clients come and tell me, in Malayalam, like, oh, you look very young, like, would you be able to handle this matter? Do you want a senior advocate who is generally a male in this issue? And I would have to, speak to them about it, whether that's something that they really want, because it's a question of service and not really a question of whether I'm capable or not. And if they prefer a senior advocate, they should get one. Then I've also had talks like when I had a son, I had people come up to me and say, oh, if you're here, who's taking care of your son? So there have been times when I've said God, and I just like look at the reaction and see how they would react. There is nobody at the house, and God would be looking at him or whatever. But so the thing is, what I've felt is there is always a second guess when it comes to women in workplace. So are you dominant? If you're dominant, are you acceptable as a dominant person? Right? That's the second guess. Are you intelligent? And if you are intelligent, are you desirable, or are you easy to approach? Are you amiable? Are you accessible? That's the second part of it. And in fact, in that, I would also include, are you arrogant? Even though you're not. And if supposing you're dominant and intelligent, but people generally look for also the traits of being gentle and sweet, etc., even though that's not really a quality that is required of my profession. And the other thing is, how does someone weigh a society's responsibilities on a woman and accept the fact that she's also a working woman? So I've had a lawyer. So these things happen in a courtroom. So supposing someone has a case, but they're not able to really appear for the case because they have multiple cases, they would ask another advocate present in the courtroom to represent for them. So which is usually a sort of place where you ask for time or you ask for a specific request and the court would grant you, etc. So I had this one conversation with a lady advocate. I didn't know her at all. So I was walking into the courtroom and she called me and she said, "Could you represent a matter for me?" And I said, "Yeah, I could." And then she told me what the matter is. And instead of asking me whether I had experience in representing such matters or I had experience in presenting before the particular court, she went to ask, Mole, Perenda, Nadevidia, Videvidia, Husbandara, Evidana, what does he do? And in the end of it, she was like, "Iduvara kochunnu ayille." I am like, you know me for 30 seconds. Like that's where the tangent is going, right? And this is a woman in workplace. So even though she was in workplace, even though she is a working woman, even I'm assuming she was much older than me, she has a family of her own. The idea is that there is always a second guess when it comes to women in workplace. And I hope that that would just, you know, go away pretty soon, pretty quickly.
Mm, that's true, Raga. We hope so too. Now, with this, we move to the second part of this conversation, and which is, we have few questions with us, and Angie, my co-moderator, would be taking us through this section of the session. Over to Angie.
Okay, thank you, Pooja, for bringing me in. Raga, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation. I think some of the things that you've talked about, they've just beautifully brought out what alienation really looks like. Um, is it the expectations that work has from you, or is it a behind the scenes perspective that the expectations of the job are the same, but still there are people coming with their own perspectives of what as a woman you'll be and what you'll be able to do and not able to do? So I'm just going to ask you to bring in some more light on what kind of inequalities have you experienced at the workplace with respect to the other gender?
Inequalities, it's not very stark as it would be for someone who than me, but inequalities in the sense of intellectual acceptance is something that I felt always. So in, let's say, a courtroom where it's again 98% men and 2% women, and I would argue a case and I would win the matter. I've had advocates who are probably the same age as me come and tell me it's because you look good that you got the order. Whereas, I would have studied my case and I would have presented, and I've had, good accommodation, as we call it, in the sense where the judges would listen to you and appreciate you for the input you do make. And but still, I've had those comments, and I've generally had comments on how I look and pleasing to the eye and all those. So for me, the inequality has been mostly of intellectual acceptance that if I'm in a table with men, I don't expect, like, I come with an open heart as to what the men has to say. I don't see them as men or, or anyone who is of the other gender who's capable of certain things like hurt or pain or, particularly demeaning words or actions for that matter, which we generally see outside as a society. But on that table, I'm looking for intellectual inputs. And when I walk into a room or I walk into a table, I expect the same expectation of me, that, they accept me for the intellectual being I am, and not really because I come from a gender. So I don't want mollycoddling, and I don't want sort of like, oh, you have to say something like the girls speak, or jokes like ladies first. No, like I would rather have a seat at the table where it's equal, like the recognition is equal.
Bringing in this very interesting aspect, Raga, of how there is this one extreme of outright, inequality that gets practiced, and the other extreme of doing it with patronizing. And I think a lot of us tend to ignore the patronizing aspect of it, that also exists and that also is inequality. You wouldn't do that to a male counterpart.
Yeah,
So why would
yeah,
you do it to a woman?
exactly.
Yeah.
So I've had clients who would come and tell me, after the case, and also when it comes to payment of fees, they would say, you're my daughter's age. I'm going to call you Mole. And I'd be like, no, just pay my fees. Like, I'm happy with my fees. No, don't compliment me anymore. So that's the patronizing. To a certain extent, you will have to allow it because it happens. you shouldn't be appearing as very difficult. But I wish it didn't exist in the first place.
Yes.
Which is something very interesting, Raga, that when it comes to giving deciding on the salary to be given to a female employee vis-a-vis when you are recruiting one or a male, we generally tend to understand that being a man, he's the provider, he has to run the house, so he better be given a decent salary, and women are just supplementing the income of the house, of the family. So this aspect can be compromised in some way. This is the general notion of people across the society. So quite right. Angie, can we move to the next question?
Yes, I want to bring in Pratap for the next question. Pratap, would you like to share with us what do you think? So, Raga has talked about the kinds of inequalities that are existing, and all of us have in some ways shared something or the other related to it. So, what do you think are the causes for such inequalities existing?
See, I heard Raga out, and no, in fact, if you personally ask me, given the talent of, as I said, the way we are genetically wired, no man can equate a woman in being a good lawyer. She's absolutely got the speech moment to mesmerize any courtroom, and it's surprising that more men are taking up that profession because it's a very, very pro-women profession of what lawyers are supposed to be made up of. I've got a lot of lawyer male friends. I've got lawyers who are women also that I know very well, and it's surprising. Some kind of inequality is prominent, and you can see it in, especially you go to Kerala High Courts, you find majority of the black courts are men. But why is this happening? In my view, are two. One is the basic how you have been brought up. That women are supposed to do this, women are supposed to do that, women are supposed to do this, etc., etc. Your list of expectations from women are laid out from birth. And for boys, you have a list of expectations which you lay out. These are what the boys should do. And I think maybe the next 1 or 2 generations, this aspect is going to take a huge sea change in what is going to happen. The second is not understanding the inequalities that exist in the way you are wired. Please appreciate that. If you both try to be equal, then men should be women, a woman should be a man. Both are not the same. They are different. And the minute you understand those differences, all this will change. Because what happens is, well, as Raga was saying, patronizing and all those talks do not happen if it was a male lawyer that you're discussing too. It's a very, I would say, a childish way, and maybe the education footprint that the person who has, whether he or she has money or whatever degrees they have, there's a moral education that you have on your head how to take your approach forward. These inequalities are existing because you do not understand what the other person is like. The minute you start appreciating the other individual to be an individual, this problem solves. When you do not see people and you see people only in a very particular limelight, okay, and this particular problem is because opposite genders attract. Okay, and that barrier is there that needs to be managed, and that's why we have a lot of ethical codes to manage that in the workplace. Respect the other person for the person he or she is, not for just being because gender. And many of my colleagues know that, when I have to say something to them as a colleague, I will say something to them like I would tell them like a male colleague. It's not that, I will make it more beautiful and then put it across in such a manner to make them feel, why is he speaking to me like this when I speak to her? It's the same. As long as you see the person as an individual and your value systems are in place with you, you don't have an issue. The minute anyone has that value system issues hanging around, you will start all this patronaging and going and telling a lawyer because you look good and that's why you won the case. Then all the beautiful lawyers in the world need only be hired. Why do you want male lawyers at all? Or all the handsome lawyers should be practicing in the judges who are women, and all the pretty girls should be practicing in the courtrooms with the judges are men. Is that what such people are expected? No, it is talent. And I am very clear that women have got a much more advantage by their genetic wiring to be better lawyers than men. And maybe that's why Raga is doing so well too. So please understand, respect the individual, and then understand the basis of inequality, that both are not wired same, both have the strengths, both have their different, they have weakness areas too because of the genetic wiring. Understand that and take it forward. You will not have this inequality. Not understanding the inequality is the biggest problem for these inequalities at the work spot.
So I'm going to be a bit of a devil's advocate over here and bring in the aspect that you're 2-3 times you've mentioned this genetic wiring, and Raga has the genetic wiring, and being a woman, she's in the right profession. So I'm just going to bring this up because we're a lot of the qualities that women possess. Being good with language is one thing that a lot of women have. And there are reasons for it. There is the kind of exposure that we get, and there is the kind of conditioning that we get. But the moment we call it genetic wiring, it's again undermining the entire work that the person has done in her life, her own intellectual competence, something that she was referring to. So I think that's something, just wanted to bring that in a little bit. Is that okay if we move to the next question? Yeah. So the next question is very connected to.
Go ahead. What I mentioned,
Thank you so much.
Go ahead. What I mentioned, the speech center. Speech center is much more prominent in a lady than a man. So that makes it more advantage. And the brain scans all show all that. That's what I'm saying. You're more prominent. Use that as a strength.
Okay. All right. I get that. Thank you.
Agnes?
Yes.
Yeah, my daughter is also a lawyer. And when she has a male member sitting in her chamber, and I just want to point out his perspective. So, whenever she does good, and when she comes back to her chamber, her boss will always appreciate her. Yo, we got a call from the client and they were very happy the way you handled everything. And the male member always tells her that because you're a female, always, feedback is given. We males go out and we do so much. Never ever will the client call up the boss and tell that, we've also done a good job. So actually, it's not just the female who's suffering, even the male, because of the female there. I see a lot of heartburns.
The perks of being a female.
Thank you so much, Rajniji, for bringing in that perspective also.
Yeah.
However, for one more question to Raga about litigation, since she's a litigator, I think one of the questions I'd want to know that when people are coming to you with their cases, generally, what is the kind of preference that they come up with?
Basically, I'm from Tamil Nadu. I'm not from here. I'm from a town called Madurai. And so I settled here after my marriage. So basically, I have no roots here, in the sense I do not have family or people to generally give out cases. And my rapport of clients have generally been like word of mouth. So I will win a case, and that client would refer me to another person. Then the chain would go on and go forth, and that's how I have my list of clients now. And but it's not about the fact that they approach you, because as I said, at the time of approach, it's always on the phone. It is, "Madam, any case under," and then they would come, and then they will come and see you. And sometimes they would assume, by your tone, or I don't know what it is, but they would assume that you're very young, and they would have doubts as to whether I could handle the case. Whereas my husband, who's also a lawyer, who's maybe a year older than me, he has never faced that issue. in the sense, are you too young to handle the case? He would always be sorry from the start to the end. He would never become a Monet, or he would never become anything less than the fact that he is a lawyer. Now, I do not know about much bioscience to talk about genetic wiring, but the basically the issue is not of promotion, because in our field there is nothing called a promotion. So from an advocate you would move on to a senior advocate to a judge, which requires a lot of filtering and years and decades of experience actually. But to understanding or acknowledging that so and so is a lawyer capable of delivering the work, so that is purely an intellectual assessment. Now on that I feel, on a big gap, men are preferred to women, or women with a lot of gray hair and very old and could boast of 30 or 40 years of practice are more preferred or trusted. Trusted is the word. They are more trusted than women.
So another interesting element that Raga is bringing in is that for any gender, it's not just gender that we're looking at. We're looking at an intersection of two kinds of things coming in. So it's gender and age over here. Some place it will be gender and religion. So it's a multitude of concepts that come in, kick in, and people, the way they respond comes from varied domains. Thank you, Raga, for bringing that in. I would like to ask the next question to Ashwin. So, Ashwin, how has you, being of a particular gender, determined your career growth? And have you seen any change in this over the last 1 decade?
Well, I think I would say that at least a lot of my choices through college and what subjects I picked, what jobs I took, etc., were very driven by, I think, expectations from what people do. If you have a good education, you do either engineering, medicine. The third option, or the more now prominent option, probably number 3, is economics. So I did that, and I think a lot of this was, you don't have that much exposure. A lot of it is told to you from other people. And I think there was an expectation that at least I would do something that was more financially sound. Whereas my sister, on the other hand, I don't think there was ever a discussion about, science, maths, humanities, etc. She did pol science, and then went ahead. So there was that kind of there was that distinction, that there was an expectation from me, at least, and it also includes many expectations. You're better at math, etc. That contributed to it. I think over time, at least at my workplaces, I have realized a few different things contribute to why I have certain advantages and perhaps women don't. I think one is this aspect of responsibilities at home that men often just don't have as much. And we know this from kind of the best research now, that up till a certain point in India also, there are certain kind of junior level profiles where women can be more. But as you go up and up, it just keeps filtering down. And that has to do with the expectations of childcare, among other things. But now even, I think this has been proven for Harvard Business School graduates, right? So even at that level, this is happening. So I think that was one. I systematically saw at my workplace, my managers who were excellent, leaving the workforce for a couple of years for weddings, for elder care, for child, etc., while the men of similar ages kept going through. So I think that's one factor. The other factor was that a female colleague actually pointed out to me, which was that both she and her had done the same amount of projects. Actually, she had done more projects with this particular partner than I had. And we knew each other's ratings in the company. She was definitely better at the job than I was. We knew this objectively, according to the company as well. But he spent a lot more time. He spent absolutely no time with her talking one-on-one mentoring. And he and I spent 5 different, conversations after work, going for a drink, talking about my life and my career. So I think those two differences are big, and at least the data on these two suggest that my experiences are not unique. That if you stretch it out, this is just true at kind of an India level or a global level. I've had male managers come up to me and say, "How do I criticize that female colleague of mine? She might cry." And I'm like, "Can we let's talk about what you just said. What do you think? If you don't give her feedback, what is going to be the impact here?" Just I think let's play this out as to what are the consequences of what you're saying and what you might end up doing. But this is happening much more at a kind of organization level, etc., which is I think something we need to address. And I think one of the panelists kind of started hinting about unconscious bias, or I think many people mentioned unconscious bias, and that plays a part too. I think just the expectations we create around men and women in my organization, there often was, oh, women are very good at kind of the details and the task, and so often the HR company activities were given to female consultants. The male consultants didn't touch this stuff, and so there's all at. This is not just effort at home going back. This is also effort at work, not doing main work, right? So it's all of these kind of combine to make it very difficult for going to the top as as kind of equal 50-50 distribution of leadership.
Thank you, Ashwin. I think one very important element that you brought out, and which is something that we don't often think of, is what is the kind of work that you would push for towards a woman and push for towards a man. So I think just yesterday when we were having this preparation meeting and in some conversation, we said, okay, so who would you see generally at an accounts office leading the accounts in a company? And who are which gender is mostly reflected? It's not about a few women being there, but it's generally male population there. So interesting perspective, I think, for all of us to look at which other spaces are we looking at where inequalities exist, and it's important to recognize them. I think not get carried away, but recognize that this exists. With this, I'd move on to the next question, which I'm going to ask to Sandhya now. That what do you think is the cause of such kind of inequalities at the workspace, where the career choice, the work choice, that in itself seems to be changing? So, what is the cause of such inequalities, Sandhya?
Thank you, Agnes, for that question. I think I'll answer something very similar to what Pratap had also discussed, but I'll of course add few from my experience. I believe the cause of inequality also is because of the social conditioning and how you're raised as a child. Though I come from a humble background from Kerala, I've seen my maternal side where men were preferred more. If I look at my maternal uncles, they were preferred more than my mother. But if I look at my paternal side, which is from my father's side, though there were only two male kids in that family, when my father actually got married to my mother, he ensured that she got educated. So not many people do that. He ensured that when he get married, he ensured that she gets her education. She got her post graduation, post that. Inside my house, there were times when my grandfather would come in and try to make that difference between me and my brother. But my father was very adamant about it. Okay, so he would ensure that we all sit at the dining table at the same time. There is no discrimination that men will eat first and then the second round where women will sit with the rest of the food available. So I think that started very early in my house. I never felt that there was a difference between me and my brother. That sense was kind of ingrained. And when I was hardly like 5 to 6 years old, I remember being the youngest. My father had sent me to a shop saying that you should start learning to go out, because if I travel outside, you should be able to buy things for yourself and also help mom. So helping mom was, an equal contribution. Though I saw my father also contributing on Sundays, but he also ensured that we contributed. And the point I'm trying to bring across, Agnes, here is the social conditioning. though we may have had a background, but it's up to us how we bring about that kind of difference. And that's something that we have taken forward in my family as well, to ensure that there is no discrimination. We are respected as an individual. If I'm teaching my nephew, who's a male child, to wash utensils, and I'm teaching my daughter also, and both are taught at the same time, to ensure that it's because you're helping me, not because and it's a life skill that you need to master, not because there is a gender inequality, or there is because my daughter is someday going to get married. And the discussion of marriage in my house also, when we have it with our children today, it's not that you should get married at the age of 18, and my nephew has the choice of getting married at whatever time. You see the difference. We have been brought up in a way where women or the girls should get married faster, and the men have 3 more years to get married. So it's 1821, the Constitution says. I know there is a biological reason why we have that. But what it has also done in a way is that a lot of child marriages, if you look at long years back, that child marriage also led to a lot of women not eventually working, right? They got into the family way very early. And that's similar for my mother. If I look at my mother, had she not got a husband like my father, she got married at the age of 15. She had not even, had her puberty then. So you can imagine, if she was married to somebody else who did not look at women as an individual, how her life would have been, how my life, how the children's life would have been. So I personally believe that even if we have been raised in a situation where we've seen these inequalities, it's up to us how we bring about that in the family. That's one way, which is the personal way. The second part of it is professional. The cause of inequalities in the professional. Somewhere today, now that I see, hearing about genetic wiring and multitasking, which comes naturally to us, I slightly differ by saying that no, it does not come naturally to us. And I agree with what Debbie had written, that we are trained since our childhood to do multitasking. And I remember a point in time when in my organization, I have said, I cannot possibly do 3 things at a time. It completely messes me up. And I remember having this conversation with my boss. I'm not sure what his reaction was. I didn't really bother what his reaction was, but I spoke up because I realized that when I do 5 things together, I am not able to be the productive best. So I think at workplace, we need to bring upon this fact that if a person can multitask, be a man or woman, that's there is no gender here. It depends person to person. Somebody who's very good at multitasking can be still productive enough, but I can't be. Maybe that's not the wiring that I have, correct? So but having said that, if there is a physical difference that I see between a man and a woman, I'm happy to accept it. I'm happy to accept it in a sense that, if I'm going through maternity, I don't know if we didn't have maternity leave, but paternity leaves when I was expecting my child. So if there is a maternity leave, I will not force myself out of my body context to prove that, I am equal to a man. I will not do that because it's something that I love about myself and I love to take care of my baby. So I will take that step according to the way I want it. I think somewhere that point of pushing it also has led to a lot of people believe, misconception about the gender inequality being physical aspect of a man and a woman. That's not what it is. So a couple of things that I said. One is personally, if we do have that kind of social conditioning or we've been raised like that, it's the onus is on us. How do we want to bring that family? Do we want to cut that cord and move ahead and bring about a new kind of environment for our children? And professionally, I think the cause is that sometimes we as women also accept those kind of feedback that's given to us, and subconsciously we are told that this is there with you, so you should be able to do it. You should be able to bear the pain because this is a pain that you are supposed to bear anyways, right? You should be used to it. And there's a time that we need to put the foot down and say, no, I am physically different. I may have a pain, so I'm not ready to bear it. I don't have the capacity to bear it, so I am not going to bear it. That's the only thing I see, Agnes. That's how I look at the cause here.
I think that's beautifully framed, Sandhya. I think nurturing, 2 things that sort of, really strike me from your sharing is, One is nurturing individuals to break free from the conditioning that they come with. And, as adults around, we have our responsibility to sort of look at what we do with ourselves and what we do with the next generation that's coming upon. And the other is looking at, sort of accepting who you are as a person completely, with your body, mind, soul, everything, accepting who you are and working from there, irrespective of what expectations get attached to you. I think beautifully put. Thank you so much.
I had one thing to say which I missed. I just want to bring that point also. And it's not about, again, gender inequality. In fact, for me, if I actually start discussing, I had the maximum kind of biases I got from my women leaders. And of course, I'll not name the person, but I was working with Hutchison SR, then Hutchison, today Vodafone. I had a female boss, and I'm talking about, today we have a periods day off for women, and I'm talking about that era when I want to take that leave. My women leader walked up to me and said that I also go through the same. So I don't take leaves. You see the bias there. It's just got nothing to do with gender inequality. It is just the inequality that exists in the mind, that because I can bear it, you're supposed to bear it too. And my point there was, I put it across to her and to my up manager. I said, I think she can, but I just can't stand a minute because I'm in so much of pain and I need to take a leave. And I stood by it. I stood by it to ensure that I get that leave because that was my physical need. Okay. So even if it was a female or a male boss, and if that kind of rejection would have come, I would have stood the same way. Not because she was a woman, I stood against her. I stood against the thought that you don't consider me as physically an individual who can go through a pain. So that's something also that I wanted to bring across.
So, which brings me to the point that there are these established norms across organizations or within our own minds. And sometimes they're in this form where there is either a policy for a holiday or something like that, or at other times it's in the form of what kind of behaviors do you display towards a woman, towards a man? How do you express respect towards people? So with that, I'm going to bring in Ashwin and Debbie for the next question to talk about what is respect for the other gender built on, really. What does it really mean to respect the other gender?
Debbie, please go ahead.
Okay. I considered this question and it made me really think about the meaning of respect. And I think it means different things to different people at different times. So I hear a lot about, my parents always teach me or taught me respect for my elders. I've been taught respect for my teachers. And I've often found in the classroom situation that when children are bickering, they will even say, I don't need to show respect for him, or I don't need respect for her. And so this question made me really focus on the meaning of the word respect. And the first place I looked for a definition was on vocabulary.com on the internet. And as would fit in with the scenario I just gave, it said that respect, there's an attitude of esteem or possibly obedience, that respect somehow suggests that we are looking up towards someone and admire them. And so we respect those that we admire or people that we think are admirable. Well, that was the first definition I came across, and I thought, well, that didn't sit easy with me. I think a lot of people interpret the word that way, but when we're thinking about showing respect for another gender, I went to a different definition, and it was actually in an encyclopedia of philosophy. And in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, they explore the nuances of the term respect, and they highlight the various interpretations So that they say, for example, we may come to believe that at some level, all people are worthy of respect. Now, for me, this is pivotal. So as an individual, I might not share your opinions. I might not share your politics. I might not share your taste. But I respect your right to have your own personal beliefs and preferences. I respect that. Doesn't mean I admire them, but I respect that you have those idiosyncrasies. And I think each and every one of us deserves to feel entitled to respect, simply as a fellow human being. I think only those who are deluded by illusions of their own perfection could ever assume absolute superiority over others. So I grabbed this quotation again from the encyclopedia, and it said, respect for persons is a central concept in many ethical theories. Some treat it as the very essence of morality. And I thought, yeah, I like that. And it went on to talk about Kant, the great philosopher, Kant, who was the first major Western philosopher to put respect for persons, including oneself as a person, at the very center of moral theory. And he insists that persons are ends in themselves, with an absolute dignity, who must always be respected, a core idea of modern humanism and political liberalism. Now, I identify with that definition of respect, or that interpretation of the term. And so with regard to what is respect for the other gender built upon, I believe that it's built upon the philosophy that we each deserve to be treated with respect as individuals. And so regardless of your gender, your creed, your color, your religion, everyone is entitled to be treated with respect, I believe. So that would be my response to this question. Ashin?
Yeah.
Sure. I would say that I think one of the things, I respect myself. And I think one of the ways that manifests is that it comes in the form of being able to understand why I succeed or fail, for example, why I fail in particular. Be able to explain that to myself empathetically without necessarily, punishing myself for failure, but trying to really put context around it to say that it was partly your fault, it was partly some external environment, etc. That's, I think, one of the ways in which I try to bring a larger chunk of my story to my life. And I think that's really what respect would mean once you kind of step outside of yourself, for anyone. If it's someone who's not from your class, not from your caste, not from your religion, not your gender, someone whose experience is very different than yours. 1 in 4 women are in the workforce today, 3 in 4 men are in the workforce. That fundamentally makes our experiences very different. So if I can step outside of myself and say that I understand where this person is coming from, I spend the time empathizing, hearing them out. I also spend the time educating myself about. I think those two pieces show a lot of respect. And I think for women in particular, we are surrounded by them. I think it is the fundamental to respecting women, from a man's point of view at least, is being able to understand their experiences and educating ourselves about it so we can step outside of ourselves.
Very beautifully said, Ashwin. I think bringing the context in at all times, making sure that you're not just treating every incident that happens as one standalone, but the person comes with the context, and everyone in their interactions are coming from their context and how it influences. I think if we can just begin doing that, I think world will be a better place, a different place, and we'll actually see each other becoming allies for better working and better results basically. With this, I'm going to bring in a little bit of conversation into talking about what kind of alienation have you experienced between men and women. And I'd want Surya to address this. So, 1 minute before you go into that, panelists, I'm going to take a bit of a liberty over here. We had talked about different questions and multiple people responding, but we're sort of running out of time. So, please allow me to take that liberty right now. And yeah, Surya, I would want you to share what is the kind of alienation that you've experienced between men and women?
Look, I have worked in places where I have not experienced any. So I think I will pass on the baton to Vishnu. Being the only person who's not said anything, Vishnu, why don't you, say something for me or whatever you want to say, like just like that. I mean, I've never felt, really.
When Angie asked that question, I said, it's a good question put to a wrong person. You have to ask people who work with him.
Yeah, so you can ask. I think we have 2-3 people. So you can ask Pooja and some other people. I think I saw Dr. What is his name? Dr. Malhotra.
Dr. Malhotra was here.
Yeah, so he's worked with me, and any of the ladies who've worked with me. I mean, they can vouch for it. I agree. And
Okay,
my wife,
Sam. So,
in fact, I would tell Raga, we have a lot of properties which all my wife has bought. I've not done anything in them.
So Surya, let me conclude, or let me try to understand what Surya is trying to say, that he has not come across any kind of alienation happening in his work.
And most of the ladies I worked with or selected them and they're doing well in life, they probably thought I never did that. We've traveled alone. We've had companies. I worked in companies like Tata's, which is Lakme, where we were more female. Revlon, which they're more female. And now also I do so many programs. We have like law firms and law schools and management schools and designers. I do National Institute of Fashion Technology, Delhi, and you have more females. And I've never seen anybody telling me that, or I getting a feedback like that with anybody. And so many corporations.
Anybody who's in this session has ever experienced or observed somebody being alienated?
I'm telling Raga that my wife has bought all the property and we're doing good well in them. Oh, sorry, Angie. She's thinking it's just a concept.
I'm literally cringing. You know why? Because it takes a position of privilege for a man to say, you know what, I've let my wife, buy her own properties.
Not let. She did it. No,
I didn't let
her.
If you see the conversation, will never say, I have let my husband buy his own properties and I don't do anything in it. Because it's not the way.
No, I've not let her. She does it herself. Like, so she loves doing it.
Yeah.
I have something interesting.
He only empowered her.
No, not really. She's self-empowered.
Surya,
I will go by the respect. I will go by the respect word which Debbie said, live and let live. Sometimes I don't do well. So go ahead.
During interviews, I have something very basic to tell you, that whenever we interview a woman and we ask some very key questions, such as that, when are you going to join? Or when can you join? So she'll invariably say, I'll let you know. I'll ask my husband and let you know. And the same question when we ask a man, he gives an answer right there on the spot. So when it comes to making key decisions, the woman would always tend to discuss, fall back on. I would not say that she wants to fall back on the husband, but she would think about other people and how it would impact them and then make a decision. But so this is not, I would not like to derive or come to any conclusion, but this is what I have come across for so many years.
But in education, you would come across because you have more women anyway, like that. So you will have that. I have not, because we also interview females and they say we can join tomorrow or when do you want us to join and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. Move on, Angie.
Yeah.
Vishnu is saying something, no?
Vishnu.
Yes.
Yes,
Vishnu,
Vishnu.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, I wasn't. I just said that. Only
Vishnu,
that.
I would like to add something over here.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Bajri.
So when we talk about alienation, I think being a school head, there are few things that I have seen which has upsetted me being a woman myself. And that would be questions from the management. When a newly married woman has applied, their question would be, oh, you will go in for a child. So that will disrupt the school. Now that's a very personal question, but they do not hesitate in asking that question. Second, I've also noticed that a lot of comments are made on the looks. So if there's someone walking in who is, I shouldn't say that because it hurts me making this statement, but I've heard many management people talk in that language where they will look at the person's face, because we have ladies walking in. They will like comment on the color complexion. They will comment on the weight, and they'll say, oh, you have to teach the pre-primary, but you are so fat and you will not be able to take care of the children.
But I think that will be said to a man also. I remember I used to work for Lakme and we had a conference. I was generally with a guy from Colgate, and his boss came from America and he told him, "You're so fat. What will you do for the company? How can you work for the company when you can't even look after yourself?" So that's a comment which people would make or could make. It's not gender specific. I have not experienced something like
I have met such males where they have been like, I've seen in the same interview, we had a male who was bulky, who was fat, but he was not even once told, because he was going to teach senior classes.
Okay.
But if you really are concerned about the weight, then it is actually a health issue which can be discussed.
Yeah.
But the way it is portrayed.
Or manage later, yes. I agree with you. By the way, I do training program for Indigo Airlines, and mostly in Indigo Airlines on board, all the men were removed because they added weight on the aircraft, and which landed up having more expense on the petrol which was used for flying those planes. So they removed all the men, and they only have female air hostesses because they are less in weight, and therefore they save about 4 crore rupees in petrol every year.
Angie, can I just add one point here with regard to alienation? I'll just bring in a law point, actually. So, around a few years back, the World Health Organization decided that when women deliver a baby, they have to breastfeed the baby exclusively for 6 months in order to boost immunity for the child, right? And now what the government did is, in addition to, because we are part of the treaty with World Health Organization, the government decided to take a move to adopt that into our local laws, which said that the Maternity Benefit Act would go from being 3 months to 6 months, right? And then what it saw was that while women were generally doing this to nurture the next generation, it is not something that is selfish, but the child needed it, it was better, and we would do it for 6 months exclusively. And that's a lot of effort on a woman, by the way, I've done it. And what, in terms of what it saw in employment, was that women were less preferred now, because if they do get married and they do have children, that means that by law they were entitled to 6 months leave. So my sister works for one of the top tier 4 MNCs in India, and she's a partner there. And she herself has personally told me that I don't want women in the workforce because I don't know when they would contribute less as a resource. Because if they take the 6 months gap, that's a 6 months gap on a project resource, right? So that's one alienation that has occurred between men and women in the past years.
Thank you so much for bringing that element in also, Raga.
Just one aspect on here, what Raga said, but
yes,
you must be mindful. Maybe some organizations would be doing all those kind of things. As far as Tata Consumer Products is, we have got scheme. For women employees who are on maternity, there are extended facilities also being offered. Of recent, I had a conversation with one of my colleagues. I'm just giving a real life example, who has joined us on a not on a permanent basis, but on a temporary basis. She had joined us, but she's going for a maternity. She wants to resign and go. So I said, why would she resign and go when she's entitled for maternity benefit in the long run? Okay, she's entitled to, and Pooja knows it very clearly. We made it very clear, temporary contract, whichever capacity you've engaged someone is due for maternity benefit, there's no question of any denial. Okay, so that is one aspect. It depends from organization to organization and how want to look at it. And there may be people who take this as a cost, and that is not. We in fact, our company also gives paternity benefit for the fathers also for a limited time to be with the wife at that time. That's also there in our policy. But interestingly, in Munnar, okay, where Pooja is holding command, we had a very interesting case. And, we found a lot of women coming to our hospital for deliveries. Okay, workmen coming for deliveries. And all anemic, having all kind of, medical problems, and they are migrant workmen. And in fact, there was one child and mother who was literally, medically, they shouldn't be alive, but our director of medical services has managed to revive both of them, and that is something that is truly appreciable that happened last year. So we went to the bottom of this, and what we found? There's a contractor sitting in Bihar. He catches up all the pregnant women to send them for work and says, "Go to Munnar, work for a few days, you'll get free delivery." So that company will take care of everything. And what is happening? They will have the baby and they disappear. They don't want to work anymore. So it's happening both ways. There is misuse of medical facilities when you try to offer, and when people don't hire women because of this extended, maternity benefit. But such organizations must be punished if they resort to such kind of activities, because maternity benefit is not a freebie. It's a need for the society. Okay, the law automatically happens as a codification for the society, and it's not for an individual.
I would say humanity.
And humanity, yes.
Yeah, that is very heartening to know that Tata does this. That's very heartening to know.
And also, don't forget to mention the creche facility, Pratap.
Our executors, our lady executors who travel, she can fly her Aya also, and hotel room is booked for her, so that she can look after the baby when she's doing some work in some other place. So, for example, a legal lawyer goes, we have legal ladies who are in the legal department. She just had a baby. She's traveling. She can take her Aya, look after the child while she's working, and that is paid by the company. So it depends on corporate to corporate. But yes, if someone is doing it, we must address it very, very sternly. And I think these are the forums that should bring it out and advocate, that these are not the right things to do.
Thank you so much.
I thought I'll just point out very clear.
Yes, thank you so much. In fact, for us to become aware of organizations like Tata existing and practicing these things, I think it's a wonderful thing that's happening. I remember from my own first job where I was working as a teacher in Heritage School, Gurgaon, and there was another teacher with me who was pregnant, about to deliver a baby. And she and her husband both were working in the same school. So the facility the school provided was that, once you have the baby and you've had enough of your rest, whatever time you want, after that you join back and you bring your baby along. So there's a creche facility in the school where the baby is totally taken care of. You can come back, work your hours, take a break in between, come see your child. So it sort of made it so easy for them to transition. And, for her to get that sense of, I think for a woman, it also just being all the time at home after having a baby is also too much to handle, because there's so much pressure from all the sides.
More like a lockdown.
I mean, that's other people would be able to comment more on that, I think. So this brings us to this brings us to the last and the most important one. Finally, the question that we're looking at is the short-term and the long-term changes that can be brought about to deal with these kind of inequalities. What kind of resolutions should happen? So I would want anyone from the panel now to share. What do you think? So I was planning to pose it to Debbie and Surya, and I'm also going to open it up for the others because this is going to be a concluding question. What can be the short-term and long-term solutions for overcoming these inequalities?
May I request Vishnu say something? We haven't heard Vishnu's voice. Vishnu, you go ahead. You start.
All right, so I want people to answer this question, okay? And answer is in verbal, okay? So speak.
You want the audience to answer?
Yes.
Okay.
You could repeat the question, Angie.
Yeah, the question is, what can be the short-term and long-term solutions for overcoming these inequalities?
So we're looking at solutions now.
Yeah.
Just to add a point,
Yes, Prita.
Open to audience and please speak.
We advocate this in most of our social programs when we are doing affirmative action assessments, when we go into areas. The longest journey that we humans need to undertake, it's a longest journey, is a journey from your head to the heart. Okay, everything lies between that. So your short-term and long-term lies in a distance of this, which is the longest journey. And that is change in mindset. Now I'm opening it out to the audience. And what is that mindset that you need to change if you want to make this a better place?
So all three, there's head, there's heart, there's hands. So actions also. You know, the behavior, action, whatever you want to say. So three.
We call this head to the heart, because one reaches, all the rest of the body moves.
We got it.
Meenal wanted to respond, I think. Meenal, unmute yourself.
Yeah, really a very good
Meenal,
discussion.
also make yourself visible.
I'm actually traveling, and so I can't actually make myself visible. I'll be joking.
We'll see you traveling.
That's fine. That's fine.
Vishnu, don't be after her. Speak up.
Okay, Meenal, go ahead.
See, I think when we're speaking of equality at the workplace, there is inequality that is happening even before you enter or step into the workplace. Okay, in terms of where you're coming from, where it's all coming from. I think first and foremost, as I don't know how much it can be implicated or implied in school, wherein you even in schools we sometimes stereotypically or biasly gender based comments come from teachers, from so I feel like even in school the basic place where we can bring in a change is the school, and then at least for that generation, from that child can take it back home also. And this is one place where generation to generation we can bridge in that that gap kind of a thing, wherein we treat children as equal, and even when they see it happening even in school, between colleagues, between people in the workplace, right? Somewhere that policy has to be created there, imbibed in the people in that school, right? At least I think that will help us inching a little forward in bridging that gap. Hopefully, because even to this day, even in our textbooks, I'm sorry to say that it is Ram is playing, Gita is singing. I mean, what are we looking at? I really don't know. And then we talk in length of gender equality. So I think this is one place, the textbooks, the people in the school, the children, how we treat people even in school, from the class 4 to the to the top thing, how we need to work on that first. And I think that is one place where we can really bring in a huge kind of a change in, and then yes, that can be taken back home also. As I said, perhaps that one person who understands this can take it to his house, his or her house, and work upon it, and in fact, somewhere a change will be brought about, hopefully.
Okay, Mohan, and I want Nisha to speak. Mohan, yeah, please. I think Mohan has been putting his hand up.
I think Shalini was wanting to say something. Shalini Nair.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. I think I will take this opportunity to, um, connect to Mr. Pratap, sir, who all spoke about the AA program that we have in school. We do this very efficiently every year, whether it is either in the teacher recruitment or the student. And in our school, we do not have any kind of gender bias. And I feel like very clearly, Meenal ma'am had said, it begins from school and it begins from home. So we need to educate the boys actually, rather than educating the girls, because they are the one. The wholesome education is very important. So rather than bringing restrictions to girls or bringing restrictions to the women fraternity, we need to educate the boys of our houses from young, and that is definitely done in the school. And I think the Hyden School has been very prominent in this aspect in all these years. If you ask, we have even our alumni who are working with us here in the school. We do follow this, and I think that's the success of the Hyden School. And I think that should be imbibed by every school, in fact.
I see two hands up, Sandhya and Mohan. Yeah, please unmute.
Is Mohan? Yeah, so I wanted to talk about maybe the short-term or long-term solutions. So I was also looking at, of course, we know girls' education is important, and a lot of people have mentioned that whatever we need to do, so the solution can start at home. Other than bringing about equality at home, if you have siblings or if you have children, I think involving women and girls equally in decision making at home, if you can start, and also ensure that when you have a workplace. For example, I have my own business, so I ensure that if there is an opinion I'm taking from people in my organization, the opinions are equally respected from all the genders. It's not just because because I only train women entrepreneurs. That does not mean that a man in my organization does not have the right to create strategies. Correct. So that's decision making is something that I think should be at the forefront, wherein I believe that other than the life skills that we're giving to both men and women or boys or girls, that should. Yeah, Mohan.
Yeah.
Was Mohan trying?
Hello.
Go ahead, Mohan.
Vishnuji, good evening, and Pooja, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
It's been wonderful hearing and seeing Pooja after a long time. Very well. I have been in the industry. I've been in the school education sector past 45 years, including the 8 years in modern school and luckily with 5 years in UNESCO and having played for the country. You see, my take is that, let us not see the word through set lenses. The word has changed drastically. And the change lies in an individual. Let us accept that. And I think we require women and women. And even in men, we need a woman. You need basically a feminist, approach towards the entire issue. And I think it is resolving. There's nothing called shortcut. I'm a student of social sciences. It takes its own time. But yes, the mindset makes a lot of difference. That's what I thought. And it was very educating hearing all of you with a lot of experience, and especially the school heads, very important. And I think all hats off to Pooja for her moderation. I have seen her moderating programs even in Delhi and Noida. Magically good, well operated, well done. I think the entire group, I must compliment on such an important occasion. You all have taken up very, very relevant questions and dealt very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mohammed wants to go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Jai Hind, and wish you all a very happy Women's Day. You know, I would like to make a point that if life on this planet has to exist, we need both man and woman, right? I'll put my hand down. I'm so sorry. So how can we say that a man is superior to woman or a woman is superior to man, firstly? If Eve was tempted, if Eve was tempted by Satan, so did Adam yield to Eve's temptation, right? Now, I'll tell you a small story. In the year 2008, I was serving in the army at that time, and I was chosen to lead the Assam Rifles marching contingent, saluting the President of India at Rajpath. So I had come to Delhi, and that's the time I met a very beautiful girl in Delhi, fell in love, and incidentally got married within a few days. That's my girlfriend right now, who I live in, legally my wife. And so anyhow, then she was doing a PhD, and which she is doing a double PhD now. That's a different thing. So she's more qualified than me, better looking than me, and better mannered than me, and a much better speaker than me, and much, I don't know what. Yeah. Now, anyhow, now I'll come to the crux of it. And she told me, why is it that only a gentleman officer leads the parade at Rajpath before the President of India? Why can't we have a lady officer lead the parade? And that point struck me very hard. And my father at that time also was in the army. He was the deputy chief of the Indian Army at that time. So I proposed the idea, why don't we have lady officers lead the parade as well? And on 15 January, 26 January was the parade. 15 January, I was at the Army Day. The Assam Rifles is paramilitary. I was announcing, I was doing comparing at the chief's residence where the Prime Minister, Defense Minister, they all were there. And I spoke aloud on the mic over there. I proposed this idea there. They say whatever we think of comes true for us and for others. And I threw the idea of a lady officer of the Indian Army leading the parade on 26 January. I was too junior in service as a major, you know, so the idea was shot down somewhere. But 11 years later, in the year 2019, we saw the first lady officer in the history of Indian Army, Major Khushbu Kanwar, lead the contingent at Rajpath. And we not only saw her, thank you, Vishnuji, thank you, Debbie. And we not just saw her, we saw an entire contingent of ladies. They were there on Rajpath. Now let me tell you one more thing. In the forces, in the army, my commanding officer never distinguished between me or a lady officer of some other battalion. There was no discrimination. Probably he always saw, and he was so right, saying that if I give a task to lady officer by the name of Pooja Bose, Lieutenant Pooja Bose, and Captain Muhammad Ali Shah, maybe Lieutenant Pooja Bose would do the task much better than Captain Muhammad Ali Shah. That is why he's assigned Lieutenant Pooja Bose that task. So certainly I am all for, it's not just about being a feminist. And one more thing I'll conclude by saying, a lady who decides to get married early in life, a lady who decides by choice to be a homemaker, not to work, is also empowered as long as she has taken the decision all on her own. And it has not been imposed on her or thrusted upon her. So when we talk about women empowerment, if we go on talking empowering women, who will empower henpecked husbands like me? Right? So we need to empower lives basically, not just women, and full credibility to our ladies over here who have no Sundays, who work 24/7 round the clock. They're a good homemaker, they're a good professional. And let me tell you one more thing. It's a fact, a factual thing. I'm not saying it from me. I've read it and I can quote it. Women are actually better drivers than men, by the way. Yes. They meet with lesser accidents than men. If you
That's so
see,
encouraging.
no, it's
That's
a fact.
encouraging.
It is really
You
a
know
fact.
very well how pathetic a driver I am. It's delightful to hear it on
But
Women's
you know one thing, Pooja, you are calling yourself a pathetic driver. If you observe, tell me one thing, how many times would have scratched the car or dent or an accident or a small crash anywhere? Lesser as compared to a gentleman from your household.
Mohammed, let's
Right?
not go there because that will
Okay.
demand another session of
All right.
I've
You know
scratched
what?
my
You know what? I have spoken about the status of women officers in the Indian Armed Forces, and I have shared the link over here in the chat window. And you can, it's a small 10-minute talk, and where I've mentioned that lady officers in the army, when I was serving in the army, could perhaps do a task better than me or any other officer there. And it is not about gender equality, it's not about the sex, it's not about the gender, it is about capability. Now, there could be other gentlemen or cadets, when I was training in the academy, there could have been other cadets who could not perform a task as well as some other cadet. It's about capability. Second, how many times has it happened that when we see, we tell a boy, a youngster, a small child, why are you crying like a girl? Yeah, don't cry like a girl. Come on, girls cry. Why? How many of us seen the movie Boy Don't Cry? Won an Oscar as well. Hildy Swank won an Oscar for that. Anyhow, how many of us on the road, as Pooja said, well, keeping Pooja as an exception, just kidding. Okay, I can take a liberty of saying this to her because she's on the phone, she's busy on the other phone, and so anyhow. So how many of us on the road we see, say if Debbie Smith overtook me and went away, and she might have overtaken me very well, but how many of us would say, there's someone who's driving left, right, shifting lanes. I'm sure it must be a lady who's driving, right? So the change starts from here. Yes, Vishnuji. Yes. Absolutely. And the society will not change unless and until we change our own selves. First, we have to broaden our horizons, think in a broad, wide way. Only then, yes, Vishnu, you were saying something. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to take much of your time.
I'm so glad you said that because I just needed that little trigger for me to build my thought on this. Okay. So what is it that we need to change? A short time and a long time, long term, short term and long term. Is there anybody else who wants to say something and hasn't said? Please raise your hand quickly.
But thank you very much, and I would just conclude over there. Super. Thank you very much.
Actually, I would just go ahead and thank the Major because there is not a lot of time where we speak constantly on what needs to change in the society, and we don't know if it is getting received at all at the other end. So I would really like to thank the Major for having listened to what his spouse had to say and then taking it up with his superiors to see if a change can occur. And that is something that often we wish it happens, but I'm very glad to know right now that there is a true story there. So thank you, Major, for that story.
Thank you, Raga. Thank you very much. You're not just very sweet, you're also very pretty. Thank you very much. And that calls for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is there.
Yeah. I wish you hadn't ended on that note, but yeah, thank you.
Come on, come on. And I have also sent the link. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel from there.
No,
it looks like he only listens to his spouse, not to me.
But just to be fair to him, he has been talking about professional competence and intellectual competence being the determining factors.
Is there anyone else?
Okay, let's conclude Vishnu now.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so I'm not going to, this is concluded, okay? We are already down to 32 people because it's, okay. So the question was, what is a short-term and what is long-term solution to this? Okay, solution to what? We've talked about the problem. I think the root of the problem, there seems to be a lot of it we all have experienced. At the root of it, for me, is always the problem is the fragmentation of consciousness, where we divide it into, okay, so right now we're talking about men and women, and there could be like Hindus and Muslims, and there could be like poor and rich, and there could be like simply civilized and the uncivilized world. So the fragmentation of any kind, that is the root cause to me. But what is the solution? We just demonstrated it. When you had to speak, you unmuted yourself. Okay. Now, some of you unmuted by pressing the space bar. That is the short-term solution. And those who unmuted themselves by actually completely on the speaker with the cursor, okay, like it will not go back to mute again unless you do it yourself or the controller up there. Okay, so to me, when you have something to say, unmute yourself, whether you feel too privileged and unfairly privileged, or whether you feel unfairly treated, you unmute yourself. But while unmuting yourself, make sure that the voice has reason, okay? Often we go on a trip because we've just gotten very charged with an emotion that, oh, this is unfair, this is ill, I think those are the triggers that make, instead of creating solution, they actually create further problem of conflict. The conflict never gets resolved by using another conflict, okay? So there is a term that I have used, I used in one of the writings and I remember today. It's called, I use it, reasoned resistance. Reasoned resistance. So when you resist with your voice, make sure it is reasoned resistance, reasoned voice. It's a voice of reason, okay? And today, Propel people have put up a poster, which I'm hoping somebody will share on the group, is just this. Today, unmute yourself if you have not already done it, but make sure that your voice is a reasoned resistance. It is not falling into the other extreme of the same trap. Okay, so from feminism tomorrow we will have masculinism or whatever. Okay, so it goes up and down. Today's oppressors become tomorrow's downtrodden or whatever. Okay, so that is, I think that's about it.
Vishnu, I'll just conclude in a quick half minute. And, everyone says that, if a sister goes out, when we were small, people would say, oh, take your brother along, you'll be safe and he'll look after you, he'll protect you. When will a day come when a boy is going out and the mother says, oh, son, take your sister along, you'll be safe? When will that day come? That'll be great. That'll be super to see. It'll be awesome. And I don't see that day being very far because they are self-defense classes for girls and they are being in security after the army and being in the other things. And let me tell you, I don't see that day far. Really, it is going to happen.
Okay.
We should will it to happen.
Yeah, you're there on the group, and I think we would all be very happy to share your ideas. Do share. I think Pooja to sum up because we are running very late already.
I have nothing more to say. Enough has been said and more, and some very relevant and diverging perspectives have been shared in this group. My last statement would be just a lot of gratitude for everyone for having put their minds together, their thoughts together, consolidated their thoughts. And maybe today, because of this meeting, you all deliberated about, and maybe you questioned your own constructs today, your own beliefs, and revisited and tried to kind of reason out within yourself whether what you think is correct or not, and maybe what could be the road ahead. I am not in favor of loud speeches. I'm not in favor of shouting slogans when it comes to women's liberation. I think each woman, even for that matter, the cook, my help, who works in my house, is quite liberated because she took over the responsibility of managing her family single-handedly. So I think even everybody can be liberated. Women more so if they decide that they can. I think the role towards making women more empowered, the responsibility would lie more with mothers, grandmothers, sisters, because they owe this to their fellow beings. And yes, to the men too, But I think women should not become roadblocks in the development of other women. That's very important. And the road from now onwards would be much smoother, better, faster, if we all decide that we are one, we are equal in any which way, yet we are so beautifully different. And as a teacher, as an educator, I have to say this, that let's believe in co-education, which I feel very strongly, because when we have a school which is co-educational, let us understand that we can be educated together. Because I find in the classroom one line of boys and one line of girls and another line of boys, and that's not how co-education really is. That we need to teach our girls and boys to coexist comfortably without being all the time conscious about the fact that I'm a boy and I'm a girl. So I think it starts from there. It starts from LKG or UKG, not make the girls conscious of being a girl all the time and boy being conscious of the fact that he's a boy. So I think if we begin there, and if we begin to make our schools truly homogeneous in that aspect, I think we will be on the road towards a happy Women's Day, making more women happy. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much, all of you. I am so grateful. I'm really grateful for you because this has gone way beyond our stipulated time. So I hope it has brought a little bit of change in your thought processes. And once again, a lot of gratitude to each one of you for having spent your evening with us. Thank you so much.